today we are going to be discussing a very heartbreaking and sobering tragedy that occurred literally today, 3 a.m. on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. This recent attack, it has shaken the community, rocked the nation, leaving, as of now, 15 people dead and dozens injured. And so as we unpack the details of this horrific event, you guys know me. I always try to, when I examine these things, obviously from a biblical perspective, I try to dig a little deeper. And cover aspects of it that maybe the average person may not see on the outset. Like on the outset, you're like, I would have never walked away with that conclusion. But it's just the way that my mind thinks. So I want us to reflect not only on the facts, but also on the deeper issues that are affecting our society. You guys, there's a significant moral decay that we are experiencing. Obviously, there's a need for strong leadership in our urban communities. And there's an aspect of this story that I want to cover that I don't believe many people, like I said, are going to see it. So let's just go and get into the story. What I want to do first, let's just do a quick overview of what we know so far. This tragedy unfolded during what should have been a celebration. Customarily on New Year's Eve, people in most municipalities have some sort of celebration. It's the start of the new year. They do countdowns. And this is New Orleans, right? New Orleans knows how to turn it up. So what would have just been a benign celebration on Bourbon Street has now ended in the senseless taking of life. We have Dr. Dwight McKenna, who is the New Orleans coroner. He has now confirmed that 15 people have now died from the attack, and families, yes, they are grieving as they await the identification of their loved ones. So instead of this being the start of a new year and a celebration, instead, lives were senselessly taken. So I want to, at the outset, at least remind us, dear friends, that life is fragile, right? Life is fragile. Our eternal destinies, you guys, apart from Christ, provides us with no hope. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the suspect here in this situation. The suspect in this tragedy, as we are learning, this individual, even though a lot of the mainstream media did not want to report this, they did not want to admit this, held to an ideology that radicalized him to do what he did. Over here on the Stand of the Truth podcast, I don't care about being politically correct. I'm like, let's just deal with the facts and deal with what is and not what we would like for it to be. And so, yes, our nation is grieving, but I don't want us to be passive observers, but rather I want to be a voice of truth, even when the rest of the world may be comfortable with a lie. I am not comfortable being lied to. I am not comfortable lying to my audience. And so as more information comes out, my prayer is that whatever the facts are, we just need to deal with the truth. And the American people deserve to know. Let's not play games. Let's not be Weasley with words and obfuscate the truth. Tell the people the truth. So let's talk about the suspect. The suspect's name, Shamsuddin Jabbar, was an Army veteran who is said to have served honorably in the military for over a decade. However, his military service, dear ones, it did not prevent this tragic outcome. Tragedies like this and what compels a person to do something so heinous and so wicked like this is a reflection of the internal condition of the heart. You guys know here on the Stand of the Truth podcast, I always want to ground my opinions and my worldview in the word of God. I have pulled Jeremiah 17. You guys know it well. The heart is deceitful above all things, desperately sick. Who can know it? And I wanted to bring that up because we are told that Jabbar drove a truck into a crowd of innocent people, ending lives in an instance. Now, this is YouTube. And I know a lot of you sent me clips and angles of him doing this. I am not going to show that on YouTube. I just don't think it's necessary. If you've seen it, there are plenty of other people who will showcase that. But the FBI discovered weapons, right? I'm going to show you a news clip of what they've called improvised explosive devices. The verbiage there, it is what it is, but we're going to talk a little bit about it. They also discovered an ISIS flag in his vehicle, leading investigators to consider this an act of terrorism. However, earlier reports, very early on, were reluctant to call this an act of terror, despite all of the obvious signs. Like if it's walking like a duck, it's quacking like a duck. It's basically saying, hey, I'm a duck. For whatever reason, liberals don't like calling a spade a spade. So, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But despite all of the obvious signs, I want you to notice the language that was used. Now, I'm going to play a video that when I watched it, it kind of made me a little bit upset. And I'm going to explain why. So let's go ahead and take a look. It's real short, but take a look at this.
This is not a terrorist event. What it is right now is their improvised explosive devices that was found. And we are working on confirming if it's a viable device or not. As Chief Kirkpatrick said, we're asking everyone to stay away from Bourbon Street, specifically from Canal Street to St. Anne. That is my ask. Once again, stay away from Bourbon Street, Canal Street, all the way to St. Anne until we can figure out what is going on. Our goal is to provide you additional information at the 11 a.m. press conference. Thank you so much, and we will be in touch.
Yes, I will say that we want our community and our visitors to continue enjoying. There's so much to enjoy about New Orleans, and we are going to make sure that our routes in the Superdome are safe today for the game. And yet we had this tragic event, and we're sorry again to everyone in our community. But we do want you to go about the day, as we say, just stay away from Bourbon, okay?
All right, you guys. So when I saw this video on X, the first thing I was like, ma'am, you don't make any sense. How can you claim this is not a terrorist attack and then in the next breath say that improvised explosive devices were found, but that's not terrorism? And I'm like, well, man, what the heck do you call it? Right? Instead of them gone are the days when the authorities would get in front of the camera at a press conference and say, okay, this is what we know. This is what we have reason to believe. Instead of them just saying, we saw this, and this, found this at the scene, and it's pretty much looking like a terrorist attack. They're like, no. We don't want to call it a terrorist attack, but improvised explosive devices were found. And I'm like, okay, so what does that even mean? This whole woke foolishness, this is what I am talking about. It gets on my nerves. Liberals cannot deal in reality. What in the heck do you call it? This is the woke foolishness. They can't deal in reality. They don't want to deal in truth. So they play stupid little word games like this to provide cover for the progressive and wicked policies that their administration is always pushing. If there's a situation that involves a person that happens to be of either a religion or an orientation or of an ethnicity that doesn't fit the narrative, they can't just call a spade a spade. They got to be real Weasley with words and call it something else. My thing is, why is the FBI doing past interference for the Biden administration? How stupid does this woman sound saying, oh no, this is not an act of terror, even though explosive devices were found and they already knew it was an act of terror? What else do you call it? On top of that, you have this ISIS flag. I'm sorry. I don't own an ISIS flag. I don't roll around with ISIS flags in my truck. You know, you ain't gonna find one in my purse. Like, oh, well, look at this. How did this get here? That does not happen. These are telltale signs that there's something else at play here. And as advanced technology that we have, you've got all of us are intimately connected with these mobile devices. You want the freaking FBI. You want to sit here in a press conference and tell me, no, this isn't, we don't want to call this an act of terror, but what did they call it again? Improvised explosive devices were found. Okay, what is that? Stop playing these word games with me and talk to me like a human. But here's the deal. Here's the part that I really want to zone in on, y'all, as I cover this story. Because I told y'all, I always tend to cover things with a little twist, right? Now, we don't know what else to call this, but here's the part I want to zone in as I cover this story. Liberalism and progressives, they struggle to call a spade a spade. It's one of the most illogical worldviews to hold to, because it struggles to just look at something objectively and call it what it is out of fear of being offensive. So they're more concerned. Americans died today, and they care more about being politically correct than telling us the truth. But here's another reality. We got to confront. New Orleans is a major city, and what I've noticed is that in major municipalities like this that tend to be run by liberals, there is always a lack of proactive leadership and proactive intervention in these urban epicenters, and it often creates a vacuum where chaos thrives. New Orleans, like many cities, they suffer from systemic failures in governance, policing, and moral accountability. What do we know about New Orleans? Well, the mayor of New Orleans, liberal leftist LaToya Cantrell, she too busy out here getting bust down by her police security detail to be focused and concerned about the obvious security breaches in her city. Now, I know y'all weren't expecting to hear that, but everybody knows it. She's been seen around town with this dude. She's under investigation over this inappropriate relationship. And then I was talking to a friend today, a dear world Christian. He's talking that the people, the city officials in New Orleans were too busy arguing about Kendrick Lamar is supposed to be playing, I think, at the Super Bowl, is it? And they're trying to figure out what Lil Wayne is from here and, why Lil Wayne ain't playing. And I'm like, you have this huge New Year's Eve event. And instead of you saying, okay, we're going to have this event, we're going to have thousands of people descend upon our city, coupled with the fact the Rose Bowl is on. Is it the Rose Bowl? What's the name of the game that's... No, the Sugar Bowl, not the Rose Bowl. I'm sorry. I was about to say the Sugar Shack. The Sugar Bowl is supposed to be happening. You would think that safety would be the top priority. Nope, that ain't the top concern. It was about why Lil Wayne ain't gonna be playing and Kendrick Lamar is. So here's where I want to talk about the differences between y'all gonna be mad and I don't care. There's a significant difference between liberal female leadership and conservative female leadership. And this is not an ethnicity thing, because you got orangutan white liberals who can't leave, whose cities are trash, and you got orangutan black liberals who can't leave and their cities are trash. It is the worldview. It is the mindset that undergirds how these women lead and think that is putting Americans at risk. We're going to talk a little bit about it, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. First, what I want to do, let's talk about the FBI. The FBI is investigating whether Jabbar acted alone or with others. Great. Glad to hear it. Now, surveillance footage showed these potential accomplices that were acting with him by placing IEDs in the French Quarter. My question is, how do you have an event this big? And nobody seen nothing? Where are all of the resources on the ground who's supposed to have their head on the swivel that would have noticed something strange about Habib over there? I don't know. I'm just saying, I know that was stereotypical, but it is what it is. I'm just saying, how do you have an event this big? And prior to the event, you don't have adequate surveillance. Because if you could pull this surveillance footage, that means that whole area several days before should have been adequately protected. And we're going to talk about the negligence of what could have been done to prevent this. But prior to this event, when you look at the video, and I can't show the video, there's something specific that I wanted to point out, how instead of the usual concrete barriers that are used, the negligence, somebody thought it was a good idea to put little bike racks to block off Bourbon Street, as if that's really going to stop something, right? It is important that our leaders rise to meet the challenges of this. This is some new modern day evil. You cannot let your guard down. We need strong leadership. Why? Because that is critical to restoring peace and order. We can't have restorative justice and social justice and woke policies that hinder us from leading well, because that is the ideology of the party that we happen to be a member of. Right? The Proverbs 29 states, when the righteous increase, the people rejoice. But when the wicked rule, the people groan. We must demand better leadership, more accountability. It is very important. You can't have large cities like this with large crowds like this. And the reason why I'm harping on this is because I'm using this as a case study, and I'm going to provide some very specific examples that you're going to be like, you know what? I see what she means. Like I said, it's not an ethnicity thing. Because I personally do not prefer, if I could choose male leadership over female leadership, I'm choosing male leadership hands down. But the gender is not the issue. It is the ideology. Because we have examples, like I said, of prominent females that are conservative, that lead, and these lapses in judgment and the worldview that undergirds them is vastly different than on the progressive side. So we got to demand better leadership. Why? You can't restore law and order if we don't have leadership in our cities who prioritize justice, who protect the innocent, and who uphold righteousness. I'm sorry. Y'all can call me a misandrist, but I don't care. Women have blind spots. It's how God created us. Not all. But what I am saying is overwhelmingly, because women have blind spots, if you're going to be a female leader, you need to call in the subject matter experts who can see the blind spots and the deficiencies that you have and then submit to their suggestions. That's what I'm saying. How about, I'm going to include myself in this discussion, right? I am always saying men are always 8 steps ahead of women when it comes to safety. Y'all are analyzing the threat. Y'all are analyzing threats that haven't even happened yet because it's just how God wired you. Whereas on the other hand, women, we don't customarily think this way. For example, I wanted to go to the Stop the Steal rally on January 6th, 2020. What was that? 2021. Had friends who had planned it out and was like, yes, we're going to go. And I was like, yay, we're going to go. And Robert was like, no, you ain't. No, you're not going. And I'm like, well, I can't go to the rally. He's like, first of all, you're going to be in DC. It is a highly volatile time. I can't go, so you ain't going. You have no firearm on you. Donald Trump has already asked for the National Guard. And who is the mayor of DC? I'm like, Muriel Bowser. He like, you ain't going. She don't want the National Guard. Pelosi don't want the National Guard. A wise person would want to have the National Guard at an event that large and of that importance. And both them broads said, no, you can't go. And at first, I felt some sort of kind of way about it. I was like, oh my gosh, you always being so extra, nothing's gonna happen. And look what happened. And y'all know me and my personality. I would have probably been the first one on the front line talking about let me in. You know what I'm saying? Just all, just I'm gung-ho for the cause, right? No. He said I couldn't go. The inauguration is about to happen. You know how many tickets? People like, hey, I can get you tickets. You want to go to the inauguration? We're having this on the inauguration. Can you go? Robert's like, no, can't go. I'm like, this is the inauguration. I was like, this is historic. Now, I don't like being cold. I ain't a big fan of DC either. But I was going to suck it up and I was going to go, y'all. Robert's like, nah, can't go. Why not? Once again, we've been here before. I'm so oblivious to the safety concerns. I'm like, well, surely they're going to be, and it's going to be adequate security there. You're overreacting just a bit, don't you think? He's like, well, I might be, but I just don't think it's a good idea. The Biden administration, they trying to do everything they can to just burn it all down. And I just don't think it's going to be safe. We can watch it here at the house. Fine. What is the point? The point I am making is that men are assessing threats 8 to 10 to 12 steps ahead of women all the time because they are commissioned with the God-honoring role of protecting. Women, we don't tend to think that way. We think with our feelings, oh, it's going to be a great parade. Like everyone's going to be in town. It's going to be Bourbon Street. Folks going to be drinking. We'll just put the little bike rack up. A bike rack. Not the usual concrete barricade that would have normally blocked off that street. You can bust right through a bike rack. I bet your little buddy would have thought twice when he made that right turn on Bourbon Street. He like, oh, shoot, it's a darn concrete barricade. Don't think I'm going to get through there. And I'm not saying, I don't want to place all the blame and say this is LaToya Cantrell's fault. I am making a broader point. Move it aside from her. The point I am making is that when female leadership is in charge, when it comes to safety, you need to have some point men in your cabinet that you're like, all right, Jethro, what are your thoughts? We're having this event on New Year's Eve. How are you assessing this situation? What do you suggest we do to keep the people safe? And Jethro is going to tell you, I don't know why I picked Jethro. I don't know why that's Jethro's name, but go with it. Jethro's going to be like, well, in assessing the situation, I think we need to do a sweep at least 3 days before, and then 48 hours before, and then 24 hours before, and then the day of. We need a constant surveillance. We need some people in like command center keeping their head on a swivel. Get all of your armed police officers that you can, pay them real good, pay them overtime, get them there. And then what we gonna do? We gonna put the concrete barricades up. Matter of fact, ain't gonna be no through traffic down at the French Quarter. Nowhere near Bourbon Street on that night. You want to go and you want to party, you got to be on foot. And then we might even put a bag size restriction. You can't get on Bourbon Street if your bag is bigger than X. And if it's bigger than X, it need to be see-through, or I don't know. I'm just, see, this off the top of my head. I'm just thinking ahead because I've gone to events of large sizes before. And because I'm not a friggin' liberal feminist, I care about the safety versus, well, we don't want people to feel offended and we don't want, no, you got to keep your people safe. It's a difference in ideology because when you're liberal, you think about restorative justice, right? You think about, well, the people are stealing. As long as they steal under $1,000, it's no big deal. Look at San Francisco. They got them in a ratchetang female mayor. She ain't even black. Was she Asian? Look at the crime in that city. Just look at it. Then Muriel Bowser, mayor of DC, on her watch, blatant security was offered to her. She was like, no, we don't need all that. Look what happened. Now, I think that was done on purpose. So that may not be the best example. But it happened. It happened. The point I'm making is that women have blind spots And if you're going to put a female in power, at least have one that's going to have the sense enough to defer to some sensible, logical, rational leadership in the areas where she may be deficient. I know I'm more emotional. So because I'm more emotional and I tend to be a little bit more in my feels than a man would, I'm always going to defer. Hey, what you think we need to do about that? I'm like, I ain't even think about that. Why? Because I didn't. I'm so used to you don't live. We barely can lock our own house down sometimes because we think, nothing's going to happen. You leave your purse on the seat in the car, valuables all out. And then you're like, I can't believe he broke into my car and he just stole all my stuff. And it was mine. The emotions is just in your feelings is the point I'm making. So let me move on. Here's a bit of good news, right? In response to this attack, Governor Jeff Landry, he deployed the Louisiana National Guard. Thank the Lord for a man who was thinking. And he's describing them as a military police company. Now, while this is a necessary step, we got to ask ourselves, how did we get here? How did we get here? Now, to be fair, I do want to be fair. This could have happened anywhere. However, at the same time, I can't ignore the vulnerability of many of our liberal cities because there's already a culture there that disregards law and order. And they're not tough on crime. They're just not. And then because of the low police morale, you don't have a heavy, robust police department where it's like all hands on deck New Year's Eve night. They're like, listen, we worn out. We're already short staffed. People already hate us. Everybody calling us pigs anyway. They don't have the resources to even be able to accommodate these large events. So I believe these major Democrat cities, they are easy targets. They're full of migrants anyway, coupled with the fact that there's already a ton of crime there. Violence and lawlessness already abound. So it's the perfect storm for something like this to happen. So let's go ahead and explore the broader implications, right? This tragedy, it also highlights the broader implications of terrorism. Keeping America safe has been a major problem since 9/11. And it's been a major concern since 9/11. Now, do I think America has taken liberties to encroach upon our privacy in the name of keeping us safe? Yes, I do. However, at the same time, we have to deal with the reality of the fact that we have enemies. America has made a lot of enemies, especially lately with us trying to export all of our freak, nasty sexual perversion and anti-human flourishing policies to the rest of the world. There's a whole lot of people that don't like us right now. And so therefore, there are broader implications of terrorism that have to be addressed. So the FBI, they are investigating Jabbar's ties to ISIS, a known terrorist group. And there are reports that pro-ISIS media outlets called for attacks on New Year's Eve. That's verified. And not only that, my thing is, if he had an ISIS flag with him in the car, I know some might say, well, that could just be a coincidence. And I'm like, really? Really, though? I'm like, stop it. Stop providing cover and playing these silly word games. Stop trying to, in the name of empathy and compassion. And, we just love everybody. Yes, we love everybody, but you got to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. There are people in this country who, unfortunately, Joe Biden just opened up the floodgates and let them come in who wish to do harm to Americans. Now, I'm not saying that's this guy's situation because he's been here already. He served in the military. There's another issue going on. He probably one of them sleeper cells. But yes, many of them, these individuals who wish to cause us harm, are tied to radical Islam. There, I said it. Bookmark it, put a footnote, do whatever you got to do. But it needs to be said, and it needs to be said out loud. So, dear ones, as Christians, we gotta learn to live in the reality of what is. And then, yes, as believers, beacon of light all day long in our communities. Yes, the people in your community need to know, yes, you are a Christian. You are submitted to the lordship of Jesus, so that when situations like this happen, you might be the one person, the Christ likeness that your neighbors will see, and they will come to you to be like, hey, can we pray? Pray for these victims. Let us pray for their families. Pray that God, the God of all comfort, will bring peace to their hearts and draw them closer to himself. Y'all, life is fleeting. And when situations like this happen, it makes you, one, puts you into a spirit of gratitude and thankfulness. But then also it should make us aware of our own mortality. Like in the twinkling of an eye, you could be here today and gone tomorrow. I can guarantee you those people who went to that parade, they're like, we're just bringing in the new year. They did not think that some gentleman who had wickedness and hatred in his heart would just take a vehicle and decide to plow into them, and then with working with other accomplices, they didn't even get a chance to possibly blow the whole thing up. Nobody went to that parade thinking that would happen. And the other thing we need to think about, we can't live in fear. And this is the balance that has to happen. And I can't tell my husband how to balance this. I can't. Particularly men, sometimes we can be so focused on trying to keep us safe that you also overcorrect and then end up living in fear. We got to figure out how to balance that, understanding that God is sovereign and you've taken all the precautions that you can, but you got to trust him with the rest. You got to trust him with the rest. I can't live in fear. I'm not set up that way. I like having the peace of Christ rest, ruling, and abide in my heart. And yes, I do keep Jesus in my heart and my 9 on my hip. The Prince of Peace and that peace. The two, they go together. One is subordinate to the other. Just saying.